Dow set out to demonstrate the effectiveness of its chemical killers on a nationwide scale.
In the 1930s, America experienced the largest man-made environmental disaster in history. It was called the Dust Bowl. It was largely caused by farmers tilling the once fertile Midwestern plains and leaving the soil exposed. By the end of 1934, roughly 200 million acres of cropland were permanently damaged. On a whistle-stop train tour, President Franklin D. Roosevelt saw the destruction of America's soil firsthand. In response, he created the Soil Conservation Service to save the nation's soil.
Everywhere I go and work, we're still having the same problem. Massive erosion. Erosion is when soil becomes dirt.
Rapid erosion began long ago when humans developed the plow. Its purpose was to break the soil in order to sow seeds. By the Bronze Age, vast areas around cities were plowed up to plant grains. But as their soils eroded, those once great empires vanished into dust.
We want the water to leave through a living plant. Microbes live in there, and that's called the porosphere.
And reduce the spraying of industrial chemicals that damage the soil.
Tillage is one of the most intrusive things we do in modern agriculture. It is not our friend. I'm going, wow, our producers don't really know how the soil works. They don't understand the basic ecological principles. Everything runs by carbon. We're built by carbon. The soil microbes run by carbon. Carbon is the driving engine. It runs the system.
To be specific, carbon dioxide is a gas. We breathe it out, and plants breathe it in. We also make carbon dioxide by burning fossil fuels. But carbon isn't bad. In fact, it's the basis for all life on Earth.
There's a tendency right now for us to be at war with carbon. Carbon's the bad guy, and I think this is a lost opportunity. Carbon's the good guy. We're carbon. I'm 16% carbon, and all of it came from eating vegetation and things that eat vegetation.
Plants use sunlight as energy, and they pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. They turn it into a carbon fuel, and that's how they grow. But 40% of that carbon fuel, they send down to their roots. They're leaking it out in a very strategic way to soil microorganisms. Plants are feeding soil microorganisms carbon, and the soil microorganisms are bringing plants mineral nutrients. And in the process of all that, those soil microorganisms make a carbon glue out of that carbon fuel. And they make habitat in the soil. They make little pockets in the soil to control the flow of air and water. And that's one of the ways that carbon gets fixed in the soil.
In other words, soil has the unique ability to sequester carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. The soil contains an entire universe of life.
Here I went to years of college, and I took soil science. I didn't know. I really did not know how the soil worked. It's alive.
In every handful of healthy soil, there are more organisms than the number of people who've ever lived on planet Earth.
I believe in miracles. Where you from? You sexy thing, you.
And those organisms are processing organic matter that's in the soil and putting the nutrients into a form that the plant needs. Comparing the soil microbial diversity to the microbial diversity that we're now seeing inside the human organism. You have more bacterial cells in your body than you have human cells.
And of course, the quality of the soil is huge because it's the beginning of the quality of the food. That quality food provides quality health. It all comes from the earth, Big Mama. Our health and the health of our planet are connected. If we choose healthy food, there's a reciprocation. Not only we feel better, we are healthier, but the earth is healthier.
Taking care of the microbes in the soil is critical for human health. But spraying the soil with toxic chemicals, well, does something else.
All of our soils that are under chemical conventional agriculture are almost completely devoid of microorganisms.
Spraying the soil with toxic chemicals kills the very microbes we need to give us health and pull the carbon from the atmosphere. The more tilling that's done, the weaker the soil gets, and the more farmers feel compelled to use chemical sprays. This is the vicious cycle of industrial agriculture. The roots of industrial agriculture go back to a German scientist named Fritz Haber. Haber invented a process for making synthetic nitrogen fertilizer that increased food production. His other scientific breakthrough was the creation of poisons known as pesticides. Haber used his pesticides as the first chemical weapons in history. Then he developed the poison used in the gas chambers of the Holocaust. When the war ended, U.S. chemical companies brought Haber's poisons back to America and rebranded his toxic chemicals as pesticides for American farms.
Dow set out to demonstrate the effectiveness of its chemical killers on a nationwide scale.
When the war ended, all the energy that went into fighting the enemies in the world went into fighting the enemies on the farm.
All of a sudden, chemical fertilizer, nitrogen was available, and farmers could toss that on a field. Or even if they hadn't taken care of their soil, they could get a good crop for a while.
Together, these wartime innovations created the most powerful industrial food production system the world had ever seen.
We created an infrastructure around single types of industry, and then we decoupled livestock and row crop production. We found people who were really good at raising livestock, and you found people who were really good at growing row crops, and you split those two camps.
That ushered in this big philosophical shift in terms of how we approached farming. Instead of understanding and honoring natural processes, we could just throw out these chemicals. We just throw out more and more of them. It kept going up and up and up.
It takes more nitrogen now to raise a bushel of grain than it did in 1960.
Our chemical fertilizers mask the problem of degraded soils. Modern agriculture was not designed for the betterment of the soil.
Today, our most common crops are genetically altered to resist the spraying of toxic pesticides. For example, the #1 crop in the United States, field corn, is almost entirely sprayed with glyphosate, a chemical suspected to cause cancer that's so oversprayed it's found its way into our drinking water.
These chemicals, which were considered dangerous to begin with, are now being used at rates that would have been inconceivable 20 years ago.
Every year, for every American alive, 3 pounds of toxic chemicals are sprayed onto the food grown on our farms.
That goes into the soil, it goes into the water, it goes into our bodies. It's not just on the food you eat, it's everywhere.
Most of the agricultural industry's pesticides and herbicides transfer directly through breast milk to babies. There are over 200 peer-reviewed studies that correlate the spraying of these toxic chemicals to effects like ADD in children, pediatric cancers, and birth defects. That's why juries have begun to award billions of dollars in damages to people who contracted cancer after using glyphosate. A big reason these chemicals make us sick is because just as toxic chemicals kill the microbes in the soil, they also kill the microbes in our bodies.
What I tell people is your body can handle acute stresses, but it cannot handle chronic stresses. Soil ecosystems the same way. If you keep dumping the fungicides, you keep dumping the herbicide, you keep dumping the insecticides, you keep doing the tillage, chronic stress, it doesn't function anymore.
Since chemical agriculture ramped up worldwide in the 1970s, we have lost 1/3 of the Earth's topsoil. But industrial agriculture isn't just harming our soils, it's also affecting something much larger.
The most massive tsunami, perfect storm is bearing down upon us. But fossil fuels, carbon, coal, and gas, are by no means the only thing that is causing climate change. Now, because the fate of water and carbon are tied to soil organic matter, when we damage soils, you give off carbon. Carbon goes back to the atmosphere.
Healthy soils absorb water and carbon dioxide. But when we destroy soil, it releases water and carbon dioxide. This dries out the soil and turns it into dust. The process is called desertification. And how we deal with it could determine the fate of more than just our climate.
Desertification is a fancy word for land that is turning to desert. And this happens only when we create too much bare ground.
Soil and the plant and the climate are connected. What we want is transpiration, when the moisture leaves through the plant. When it does that, it increases humidity, and when it increases the humidity, we have more rain. 60% of our rainfall comes from the ocean. But a lot of people don't realize 40% comes from small water cycles where our rain comes from inland. What's going on is we disrupted the small water cycles. That's when you have too much sensible heat coming off bare soil. You're having these huge vortexes of hot air going out. Instead of attracting the rain, it's pushing the rain clouds away.
According to the United Nations, the world's remaining topsoil will be gone within 60 years. In other words, unless we find a way to save our soils, we have 60 harvests left. The global scale of the problems we face may seem insurmountable. But in every fight that seems unwinnable, there are those who refuse to give up. To stabilize Earth's climate, we can use the most powerful carbon capture technologies. The photosynthesis of plants and the microorganisms in the soil. And the one type of farming that does this the best and draws down the most carbon is based on the concept of regeneration, which simply means to repair the damage we've done and make things better. Soil that is not tilled stores more water, thus increasing microbe growth, which leads to more plant growth and even to more local rainfall. This is the virtuous cycle of regeneration. Gabe Brown's soil is also pulling more carbon out of the atmosphere. For every 1% increase in organic matter, an acre of soil draws down 10 more tons of carbon.
I mean, that's huge. We have to reduce tillage. We got to grow cover crops. We have to get a living root all the time. We can't have these bare periods with nothing growing on them. We've got to start using these principles to restore the water cycle. And it is fixable.
Human beings emerged in paradise. If we restore all the degraded land on the earth, we can return to paradise. To see a stream return and flow, to bring back fertile soils, to see biodiversity return to a place that was completely devastated, this is where everyone can find tremendous satisfaction. Bit of paradise every day. It's not that difficult. If we stop distracting ourselves with shiny objects and we start to think about what's really important to us, to see biodiversity return to a place that was completely devastated, this is where everyone can find tremendous satisfaction and the meaning of our lives.
So what decision are you going to make that will make a positive impact on this beautiful planet so that our great-grandchildren, 7 generations in the future, can actually go up and hug an old-growth redwood tree and swim in clean waters and be able to open their mouths and drink while they're swimming? And what is it that we can do today so that our children can flourish in the abundance that we've created by our decisions?
I will drive 100 miles, 1,000 miles if we have to save one farm, to open one heart and one mind. It's that one mind that you change. You don't know it'll affect another mind, another heart. That's what happened to us. It changed our hearts and it changed our lives.
You know, it's not about religion, it's not about politics, it's about love. And if you love something or you love somebody, you want to understand them and you want to take care of them and protect them and keep them safe. And that's what we're all here to do. even like the little mycorrhizal fungi and the worms and the bacteria. And if we take care of them, they'll take care of us.
Our mission is simple. We must harness the regenerative power of Earth itself. I'll make you a deal. I won't give up, and neither should you.